What are you really afraid will happen if people judge you? Think about that for a minute, because most of us have been told we shouldn't care what other people think. Just be yourself, ignore the critics, stop worrying about opinions. Sounds simple, but if it were that simple, millions of people wouldn't still be struggling with it. So maybe that's not the real question. Maybe the real question is, what are you really afraid people will make your choices mean about you? Because I don't think most people are afraid of opinions. I think they're afraid of conclusions. If you start a business, what if people think you're unrealistic? If you change careers, what if people think you're irresponsible? If you leave a relationship, what if people think you're selfish? If you try something new and fail, what if people think you're a joke? Notice something? The action isn't the problem. The meaning is. The story people might create about the action. And that makes me wonder, why does the story matter so much? Because if we're being honest, not everyone's opinion carries the same weight. You probably don't care what a random stranger thinks. So, whose opinion matters? A parent, a spouse, a sibling, a former partner, a teacher, a friend, someone from years ago whose voice still echoes in your head. Because when people say that they care what other people think, they're often talking about a very specific person or a very specific group. And maybe that's where we need to dig deeper. What are you still trying to earn? Approval, validation, acceptance, respect, belonging? Because sometimes we spend years hoping that if we make the right choices, succeed enough, achieve enough, or behave the right way, someone will finally approve. Someone will finally understand. Someone will finally say, "You've done enough. You are enough. I'm proud of you." But what if that approval never comes? What happens then? Do you postpone your life and keep waiting for it? Because here's something I've noticed: people aren't afraid of criticism, they're afraid of rejection, they're afraid of losing belonging. And that fear makes sense. Human beings are wired for connection. For most of history, belonging mattered. Being accepted meant safety. Being rejected meant risk. So maybe caring what other people think isn't weakness. Maybe it's human. And that creates another question. How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice in order to maintain belonging? Think about that. How many times have you remained quiet when you wanted to speak? How many opportunities have you passed up? How many dreams have you delayed? How many decisions have you avoided? How many versions of yourself have never emerged? Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to disappoint someone. And perhaps that's the hidden cost. Not the criticism, not the judgment, but the life you never lived because approval became the requirement. But let's go even deeper. What if the loudest judgment isn't theirs, but it's yours? Because sometimes we say, they'll think I'm foolish. But have they actually said that? Or are we thinking it? Sometimes we say, they'll think I'm selfish. But who is carrying that belief? Sometimes the criticism we're afraid of is already living inside us. We're not hearing their judgment. We're hearing our own, projecting it onto everyone around us. And if that's true, maybe the problem isn't other people's opinions. Maybe it's the story we've attached to those opinions. Maybe it's the meaning we've given them. Because at some point, everyone faces a choice, not between approval and criticism. Those will always exist. The real choice is this: am I willing to disappoint some people in order to stop from disappointing myself? That's a difficult question. Because the moment you start living authentically, someone may disagree. Someone may misunderstand. Someone may judge, but they were probably going to do that anyway. The difference is that now you're no longer abandoning yourself in the process. So here's something I'd like you to think about. What's one thing you've wanted to do but haven't? A decision? A dream? A change? A conversation? Now ask yourself, who am I afraid will disapprove? What meaning am I afraid they're going to attach to that choice? And is that story actually true? Be honest, because sometimes one honest answer reveals years of hidden patterns. The beliefs that shaped your past do not define your future. But first, you have to stop making other people's approval the admission ticket to your life. Because the life you want may require disappointing a few people, but it should never require you abandoning yourself. So before you move on with your day, just answer one final question. How much longer am I willing to disappoint myself so I avoid disappointing them? Sit with that, because your answer might change everything. Until next time, stay curious.